guys, I'm Sylvie from High Level Bandanas, and if you're here, it's probably because you want to learn how to make the bobble sleeve sweater. And what's that on the inside of the bobble sleeve sweater, you ask? This beautiful, vibrant corset? Oh, does it look like what I'm wearing today? This is the Delicate Corset, and it launches April 3rd, which means that by the time you're watching this video, this is probably already out. It's fully made to measure, like all of my patterns, and it has been tested by multiple people, which I will leave on the screen because they all did such an amazing job, and it totally fits the entire cottagecore fantasy. Okay, I'm done, I'm sorry. If you're new here, I'm sorry that I started this off with a self-promo, but I am really excited about this pattern. But anyway, let's get into the actual bulk of this video. This is the original bobble sleeve sweater, the first pattern I ever released, and that's why I figured it's time for it to have a revamp. In this video, I'm going to show you how to make this sweater. I'm going to be using thicker yarn, so it's gonna look like a little bit of a longer, thicker cardigan. And I'm also going to be kind of revamping the original written pattern. I had originally made it like so that it's by rows. That doesn't really fit what I do. If you are new to High Level Bandanas, then just know that every single one of my pattern is size inclusive, made to measure. That snort was my dog. But that's because who am I to tell you what a small looks like, what a large looks like? I'm a small or an extra small, but my proportions are so different than, let's say, someone who is also a small but 5'9" instead of 5'2". It's all different. I don't know. Made to measure is the way to go. So before we get into it, I do suggest, if you are serious about making this, you get the written pattern, which I will have linked in the video description. By the time you click on that link, it's gonna be fully revamped with better instructions than the original. If you're watching this and you have the original pattern, just send me a message with a screenshot of the pattern and I will be more than happy to send you the new revamped version. I can't believe that this was the first pattern I have ever written, and I'm very excited to work on it again. So as I said, the first thing I need to do is go to Michael's and grab some different yarn for it. So let's go do that. All right, back from Michael's, and I got quite a bit of stuff. So I did get 4 of these, and this is the Lion Brand Yarns Woolies Thick and Quick. It is super bulky, size 6 yarn, and it says to use a size 9mm hook. Also, this is the color Mustard. I also ended up getting a whole bunch of this Pound of Love in yellow because I have an idea for a sundress for this summer, so keep your eyes peeled for that. But without further ado, let's get started. So I'm just rereading the old version of the pattern, so if you see me looking down, it's because I got my laptop right here. For materials last time, for this one, I used 4 skeins of Lillian Pine Aspen Worsted in Pixie Stick, and then I used 4 skeins of the same brand, so Lillian Pine in Graffiti, which is this one. Each skein is 210 yards per 115 grams skein. So that means I used roughly 840 yards of each. Now, these guys are 106 yards or 97 meters and 170 grams. So if I used 150 grams per skein of the last one, and these are 170 grams in theory, because it's a different weight, so the yardage is a little bit different. I also used a size 4 hook for this one, so I did size down. That's why you see these stitches are actually very close together, but I really like that for this one. I find double crochet, usually you can kind of like stick your fingers through it, and this one, because I sized down on my hook, I didn't need to. That said, I used up a lot more yarn than I probably could have because I sized down on my hook. So just keep that in mind when you choose your hook size. Again, this is made to measure, so it doesn't matter what size yarn you use. You can pick whatever size yarn, and depending how spaced out you want your stitches, whatever size hook you want. So we're gonna start off with the back panel as the first piece. Now the back panel is obviously the panel in the back. And the first thing we're gonna need to do here is figure out the width. This will determine the width of the entire sweater. So you can see mine ends here, and when I put my arms down, it's kind of halfway past my shoulder. So if you measure yourself from shoulder to shoulder, so I got 17 inches. And so I wanna add a couple inches in there so that it's slouchy like you see here. I definitely added 4 inches to make it slouchier. I'm gonna add 5 inches for this one because I want it extra slouchy. For my fruit cardigans, which I'll put a picture here, I make those extra wide. Those I usually make 27 inches of width, so I have like really kind of small sleeves and it's just super slouchy fit. Totally up to you what you do. And because this is chunkier, I don't want to add too much because this is already going to be pretty large. For the next measurement, this will be the length of the cardigan. So for this, you're gonna measure essentially from your neck down to where you want this to go. Now, I want mine to be pretty long on this one. Here, 24 inches long. Now in the pattern, I do write remove an inch to account for the trim being this part here. You can see it on the wrist. It is about 1 inch thick. If you are using thicker yarn, might be thicker than that. If you want to make thicker trim, go ahead and make thicker trim. I'm probably going to do about 2 inches with this. Just make sure you account for that. Now that we have those measurements, let's begin. What is happening? Do you guys also have this problem? First thing you guys are going to do is chain up until the measurement that you got for your width. I'm gonna chain up to my 22 inches. Should also say, you're measuring from shoulder to shoulder, but make sure that if you double this measurement, so let's say for me, 22 times 2 is 44, I also want to double check that if I measure around the widest part of my body or upper torso, which for a lot of us will be the bust area, that this measurement is larger. So for the bust, I got 32. Okay, let's say my 22 that I'm doing for the back panel times 2 is smaller than around my bust. That means that I won't be able to close the sweater together. So definitely keep that in mind as well. I'm actually gonna use my 10mm hook, just one size up pretty much from what's recommended with the yarn, and I think it works so much better. And there you go, that is 22 inches. For 22 inches, I did 40 chains. And just for reference, when I used worsted weight yarn or medium weight yarn with a 4mm hook, I had originally chained 72 for 22 inches. Very, very important. Make sure that you chain an even number, because when we single crochet across, we're going to need to end up with an odd number of stitches so that we can do the bobble stitching properly. So once you're done single crocheting across, you should have one less than the number you chained. So I chained 42 because I started in the second chain from my hook, and I now have 41 single crochets. And if I do this, it fits all the way. So moving on to the next step, which will be to do a triple crochet bobble. So you're going to be chaining 4. So as you can see, I've got my 4 chains here and turning, and then we will be doing a triple crochet bobble in the first stitch. So let me show you how to do that. Ignore my feet. So you're going to be yarning over twice as if you were to triple crochet. Insert your hook through the stitch, yarn over, and pull through. So now you have 4 loops on your hook. Yarn over, pull through 2 loops on your hook, like this. Yarn over again, pull through the next 2, and then we are going to repeat this 4 more times in the same stitch. So yarn over twice, insert, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, and then again, in, pull through 2, pull through 2. So now we've got 1, 2, 3, and again, 1 and 2. That's 1, 2, 3, 4. So now the last time in the stitch. Boom, boom. And there you go. So now you should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 loops on your hook. So once you've got the 6 loops on your hook, you will yarn over and pull through all 6. And now we've got this huge, huge bobble. I love it. It's gigantic. It's perfect. And that is that. You can see on here, they're a lot smaller. They really just like stick out. I mean, you can see how just like squishy this is. Yes, it's a lot of work. Yes, they're yarn eaters, but I mean, come on guys, look how cute. So very important in this pattern, we will not be closing this off with a slip stitch. So once you're done this, all you're gonna do is just double crochet in the following stitch. So you can see it's already really sticking out, and you're gonna repeat. So you're gonna triple crochet bobble in this one. Ooh. And another double crochet. So that's what we're going to be alternating the entire way down. Because you made an odd number of stitches in your first row, that means we should be starting with a bobble and ending at the end of the row eventually with a bobble. So alternate bobble, double crochet, bobble, double crochet all the way across, and then come back. If you guys are finding that the 5 is creating too big of a bobble, you can stop at just doing like 4 of them in the same stitch instead of 5 full ones. I just prefer it that way, and I really like the triple crochet bobble for this pattern as opposed to just a regular one, because I find it makes a really nice long bobble stitch. And I mean, like with this pattern, they look small. With this, they're going to look huge and puffy, and it's going to be absolutely amazing. Yes, yarn eaters, but still, sometimes it's just so worth it. Okay, but seriously, look at how puffy this is. Once you are done your row, you can give yourself a round of applause because it probably feels like it takes forever, and it should look like this, starting and ending with a bobble. Once you're done that, you are going to chain 1 and 1 only, turn, and single crochet across. Now, when you single crochet across here, I recommend counting and just making sure that you have the same amount of single crochets that you had in your very, very first row of single crochets that we did after chaining. So for example, I had 41 in my first row of single crochets. So I want to make sure I'm going to have 41 here as well. And you should, because if you started and ended, it means you have an odd number. You're all good. You're doing great. Once you're done with that, you are going to chain 2 and turn. The reason we're chaining 2 is because now we are alternating. So instead of starting with a bobble this time, we are going to start with a double crochet in the first stitch. And then you're going to triple crochet bobble in that second stitch. And so what that does is it's going to stack your triple crochet bobbles kind of like in between the ones from the previous row. And I'll show you what I mean in just 1 second. There you go. So as you can kind of see, and I will try to show you once I've got a little bit more in there, but the bobble is in between these 2 from the previous row, starting with a double crochet, and this row is also going to end with a double crochet. Why? Because we have odd numbers, and that's how math works. All right, so now that I have 3 full ones, you can see a little bit better how they are not on top of each other, but they are staggered. This is super cute. I am so excited I picked this yarn. Look at the difference, how wild that is. And so this kind of brings me to the next step. So once you're done this row, which starts and ends with a double crochet, you are going to chain 1, turn, and single crochet across. From there, you're going to repeat the row that starts with a bobble, single crochet across, and then chain 2, and then the row that starts with a double crochet, and alternate that until you get the height that you want. So for this one, I did 6 bobble rows. So that's 12 rows total because there's a single crochet row in between each bobble row. And that gave me about 5 inches. So as you can see here, it's like very cropped, this one. I recommend doing about 1/3 of your total length measurement. So this one was 17 inches, and so 5 inches, about 1/3 of that. And I will keep checking in once I get more of this done, but I'm not gonna do this in my craft room. I'm gonna go do this downstairs while I watch TV. Oh, hey, it's me again on my couch. I just wanted to show you guys. So I have all of row 2 done. So there you go. That's what that looks like, ending on a double crochet and obviously starting on a double crochet. As I said earlier, I'm just gonna be chaining 1, single crocheting across, and I'm gonna repeat everything that we just did until I reach the desired height. So just remember, guys, on rows that you start with the bobble, chain 4 at the start, and on rows that you start with the double crochet, just chain 2 at the start. So an update, it's not even the end of my 3rd row, and I've already run out of yarn. So this can be just great. Okay, so it's a little bit later on, and I did 4 rows of bobbles, so 4 bobble rows, and that gives me about 7 inches long for it. So I'm trying to debate whether that's enough or if I want more. Here's what it looks like proportionally, and so I think this is enough, especially with the thickness of this yarn and the fact that I kind of want to match it on the sleeve. If I do any more than 4, it's going to be gigantic. So we're going to stick to that 4 rows, and then the rest of it will just be double crochet. So once you do get to this point, and if you hear thumping in the background, that is my dog. But once you get to the point that you decide you've had enough rows of bobble stitches, make sure that you end on a bobble row and not a single crochet row. And then you are going to chain 2, turn, and double crochet across. And you're gonna keep doing that until you have the length. Thank you. You're gonna keep doing that until you have the length that you want, so your measurement B. I should also specify this is where you would have switched to your second color if you want to make it 2-tone. Okay. I'm just making it the 1.
The days that we're not free are tomorrow and the 29th.
All right, so it is the next day now. It's pretty lengthy. It's going to kind of pass my bum, which is exactly what I wanted. In total, I did 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 2, 4, 6, 8, 19 rows, and I think I might just do 1 more so that I can end on that 20. So when you reach the length that you want, or measurement B, you are going to tie off. Also, this is my 3rd skein of this, so if you're gonna make it big and long like I am, then you're gonna need a lot of this. I definitely miscalculated, but anyway, tie off and then weave in your end before we can move on to the next step. Time to move on to the front panels. We first need to measure the width of your neck from one side to the other. So let me demonstrate. So from one end to the other, just the middle here. So I get 7 inches, and then you'll be subtracting that from the width of the back panel. I forget how wide I made my back panel, but I'm going to remeasure it. Okay, 25-ish inches. Well, it was supposed to be 24, I think, but now it looks like it is 25, so we're just gonna roll with it. So 25 minus 7 is 18, and then divided by 2 is 9. So I know that each front panel will have to be 9 inches so that I can account for the space for my neck. So these front panels are pretty easy. They're going to be worked in the exact same way that we did for the front panel, except so that when we sew everything together after, it lines up a little more seamlessly. For our first bobble row, instead of starting with the bobble on either side, we're going to start it with a double crochet on either side. And then that way when we sew it together, you're going to be sewing the bobble from the back panel with a double crochet from the front panel, if that makes sense. If it doesn't make sense to you, it will make a lot more sense later. So anyway, now that we've measured, you know the deal by now. So you'll grab your yarn, chain all the way up until you reach your measurement that you just did. So for me, that's 9 inches. Make sure that it is an even number of chains. So starting in the second chain from my hook, I will single crochet across. So that means that when I'm done single crocheting all the way across, I should only have 17 single crochet because I had chained 18. Whoops. And now instead of chaining 4 to start with a bobble, we're going to be chaining 2, turning and starting with a double crochet. And the reason why we're doing that is because eventually, once we put the front and back panels together, they're going to line up at the bottom. So if we were to start with a bobble, as you can see, the bobbles kind of stick out, so it would just look a little bit wonky when sewn together. What we're going to do for the front panels now is start our first row with a double crochet. So it's going to look like these ones. And eventually when we sew everything together, it'll kind of just continue and fit into place. So you place your double crochet, and then you guys know the drill by now. After the double crochet is when you would be putting your triple crochet, bobble, and so on and so forth. So again, this row should be starting and ending with a double crochet. And after you're done this one, you're going to be doing a chain 1, turn, single crochet across, and then chain 4, turn, bobble, double crochet across. And repeat for the same amount of time that you did on your back panel. So I had my 4 bobble rows in here, so 4 bobble rows and 4 single crochet rows, meaning that that's what I'm going to do on my front panel as well, so that it matches up perfectly. Well, another trip to Michael's later, and here I am. Okay.
Oh, sorry.
And then my dog actually settled and let me continue to crochet, which is what I did for a little bit here because, yeah, it's 1 degree outside, but when the sun is directly hitting you like this on your black porch, it feels quite nice. So can't complain and super excited for the start of spring. Okay, I've been out here for quite a while and it's hot. It's real hot, but I got my 4 rows done, or 4 bobble rows done. And so now I am chaining 2 and double crocheting across, and I'm going to repeat that for the same amount of times I did for the back panel, which for me was 20 rows, as you saw. And I just love what this looks like in this lighting right now. It's kind of the same shade as my dog. Number 5, and boom, there you go. Whoops. 20 rows. And when you tie this one off, it'll be really important for you to leave a long enough tail so that we can eventually sew this top part to the back panel. More is better. Number 6. And there you go, front panel number 2. Sewing time. Okay, so for sewing, what you're gonna wanna do is kinda lay out your panels like this. So I have it exactly as it would be worn with the wrong sides together. Your 2 front panels aligned at the corners of the back panel. For the one where your tail is on the very corner, it'll be very easy to sew because you'll just be matching up stitch for stitch. And for the one where your tail is kind of like in the middle, like where the neck area is on your sweater, all you're gonna have to do is just count the stitches and make sure that you start in the corresponding stitch on the back panel. My preferred sewing method is the invisible seam. You can ignore what this piece of fabric is. It's my sleeve right now. You guys will get to that part later. There's 2 ways I'm going to show you. So the first one, and this is the one that we're going to be doing to attach front panel to the back panel. I'm using a red thread for this just to show you guys and so you can see clearly what we're doing. So for the invisible seam method, you're essentially putting the wrong sides together. So let's say your bobbles are on this side, you would be matching it as worn, like I showed you earlier with how we're laying it down. So wrong sides together, and you are going from top to bottom. Let me put it through the first stitch here, from the top down. For the other side, it would be the same thing. So I would go from the top down. like so. When you're doing it on a side that has the tops of your stitches like this, you'll want to go through the middle of your stitch. So as you can see here, I've got my V from my double crochet. So I'm going to put it through the middle. I'm going to go through this piece here that's parallel as well, like so. So in my V and under this piece and pull. And so it's the same thing on the other side. So you can see it here. So I'm going to go in and it goes through both of these V's. And so what's really, really fun about this one, and that's why it's called the invisible seam method, is that when you pull all of this together, which I'll do, it just disappears. That is why this is my absolute favorite. So now I'll show you on a side that does not have the tops of these stitches. This, which will be the side of the sleeve, which we'll get to later, but it'll be the exact same concept. I'm gonna put it kind of through the middle of whatever is on the side. And then again, through to the other side will be top to bottom. And again here, I'm going top to bottom. And I'm not really putting it in any specific place when I do this. I do try to, for double crochets, let's say, I do try to put it through like the bottom of the double crochet and then the top of the double crochet, as long as you're doing the same thing on either side and aligning them. And even though it's not halfway through a stitch, when you pull, it should have the same result. There you go, it's kind of disappeared. But obviously it won't be as invisible as if you're to use the tops of your stitches, because here they're a lot more hidden, but it still yields a very similar result, and I'm not going to be using red thread for it. And there you go, sewn together at the shoulders. It's gonna be cozy. So now the sleeves are going to be literally the exact same thing that we have been doing, except I'm going to explain how to measure the width and length of your sleeve. To find out how long your sleeves are going to be, the first thing you're going to need to do is grab your tape measure, measure your arm span from one wrist to another. So for me, if I do this and then I take away a few inches, so that says 53, I'll remove 2 inches for what I'm holding in my hand. So we'll call that 51 inches. Take your arm span number, so we know mine was 51, and you're going to subtract the width of your back panel, which for me was, well, we figured out it was 25 inches when I remeasured it. So 51 minus 25, that makes 26. And then I'm going to want to divide that by 2 because we have 2 sleeves. So 26 divided by 2 is 13. So that means that my sleeves are going to be 13 inches long. Now for the width of the sleeve, because we're just going to be making it as a rectangle in the exact same way that we just made the front panels, measure around the thickest part of your arm. So for me, that'll be my like upper bicep area, and 11 inches with a sweater. So I know that's the absolute minimum that I can make. I don't want my sleeves to be this tight, so I'm going to add a couple of inches. I'm gonna call that 15 inches wide. So my sleeve is going to be 15 inches wide and 16 inches long. And with that said, I want the bobble rows to match, so I'm going to be doing 4 bobble rows on my sleeves again. It doesn't matter for this if you choose to start with a bobble row or with a double crochet row. That is up to you. I'm going to do the same thing we did for the back panel, so bobble, double crochet, bobble, double crochet. And then I'm just going to add the double crochet rows until I reach my 16 inches of length. And I'll show you those dimensions once I'm done doing it, but you guys know how to do this by now. Make sure you're chaining an even number, and then you single crochet, and then you do your bubble row, and then you do a single crochet, and then you do a double crochet start row, and then you do single crochet, and then you do another bobble, and so on and so forth. Now, why don't I just do the sleeves in the round, you may ask? Well, I hate the way that it looks. When you have your stitches done in rows as opposed to done in rounds, the rows are kind of like on top of each other, if that makes sense, whereas in the round, the pattern is different. And so that's why I do that. It just keeps the symmetry. And I did 26 chains for my sleeve. Skein 7. So there you go, 16 inches. I did 10 rows of the double crochet, and like I said, 4 of the bobble rows, each with a single crochet row in between. And it's also 15 inches across, which is exactly what I wanted. So once you are done with your sleeve, you're going to tie off, and you're going to leave a long enough yarn tail so that you can sew the entire side together. Hey, enjoy this lovely view of the floor and my table. It's time to move on to the wrist cuffs. Now, as you can see, I've kind of already started it here. I am going to show you how to do half double crochet slip stitch and back loop only, which is also known as yarn over slip stitch by some. I just go by the really complicated name because whatever, it is what it is. Sorry, I got a little bit ahead of myself and just kind of kept crocheting here. So chain 6. And then starting in the second chain from hook, you will be doing half double crochet slip stitch and back loop only, or yarn over slip stitch all the way across, which will give you 5 stitches across. To do this stitch, and so pretend this is your foundation chains, but for me, it's just a couple of rows in, you will yarn over, insert in the back loop only, like this, yarn over, pull through, and then instead of yarning over again like you would for a double or half double crochet, what you're going to do is just slip stitch through these 2 loops here, which is why it's called a yarn over slip stitch or half double crochet slip stitch in back loop only. I know that sounds absolutely insane, but so anyway, again, yarn over, insert in the back loop only, pull through, and pull through. So we'll do that one more time, yarn over, insert in the back loop, pull through, and pull through. So it's going to be the same on your foundation chain. So once you're done the row, you're just going to chain 1, turn, and then repeat the process. So this is what your trim ultimately looks like. And you're gonna keep doing this until it fits comfortably around your wrist. So I've gone ahead and completed 1 sleeve already. I just did 14 rows of half double crochet slip stitch back loop only. There you go, say that 10 times fast. So that's what I'm gonna do here. I'm gonna do my 14 rows and come back to you. Here you go, this is my 14 rows. And when you tie off, leave a long enough tail so that you can sew the cuff to the sleeve, which is what we're going to get into right now. Here is the right side of the sleeve. When I attach my cuff, I want my little like V's that look like knit to be facing downward, and I'm going to be sewing these together in the invisible seam method, which I have shown you earlier. As you may notice, your cuff is most likely definitely way smaller than, you know, the width of the sleeve. This is such a bad angle, guys. I'm so sorry. Put you back here. As you can see, the cuff is definitely way smaller than the width of the sleeve. To sew it together, what we're going to do is kind of freehand how many of these you want, but for every single stitch or row on my cuff, I'm going to be skipping at least 1 or 2 stitches on the sleeve. So for instance, for the first one here that I attached into, I'm gonna be skipping like 2 stitches here, putting my needle into the next one, and then I'm going to keep going with my invisible seaming method. But like I said, I'm going to be skipping. So what that's going to do is it's going to bunch this up. You can kind of see the effect on this sleeve that I finished earlier. We're not there yet. So I'll show you afterwards. The other thing that you can do if you want to sew through every single stitch on the sleeve, you can double up. So let's say you go once into the sleeve stitch, you can sew twice into the same row on the cuff. That makes any sense. Really, it's gonna be about eyeballing it and just making sure that everything is nice and attached. And I will show you the result of this as soon as I'm done so that it makes a little bit more sense. All right, so here is what this looks like right now for the sleeve. And now what we're gonna do is sew it together like with this one here. So taking the really long end that we left earlier to sew the sleeve, what you're gonna do is fold it like so, and then we're gonna use this long tail and sew the entire side together, and try your best to just make it even. There you go. All right, so now just repeat on the other sleeve, and now we have 2 sleeves. Isn't this exciting? Would this be a thing, like arm warmers? I guess those would just be gloves. Oh my God. Oh. Okay, this is it. This is the pattern. And now my spot has been stolen completely. So maybe I'll put a pin in it. So we're gonna continue on with the trim. So the trim is going to be done in half double crochet slip stitch back loop only, which you just learned how to do. And we're going to go over 2 separate methods. I do describe them pretty well in the written pattern if you have that. And if you're all the way up at this point and you don't have the written pattern, you should definitely get it. Or good for you. Good for you for understanding the whole mumbo jumbo that is me. Okay, let me explain the 2 different trim options. So option 1 is what I had originally done with the first ever sweater. So I made it piece by piece so that the bottom trim would match the exact same length or width, I suppose, of its respective panel. So for example, this is the front panel. I crocheted a trim that went from here to here. So I did that for the front panels, and then I made a separate one for the back, and then I sewed all 3 on separately. Now, the second option, which is what I'm going to do today, is make one big trim that will be attached onto the front and back panels. I'm going to attach that just in one piece. So instead of making 3 separate pieces, it will just be one piece. If you do this, you can make your trim a little bit smaller than the entire width of your cardigan. I would suggest to keep going with that trim until when you wrap it around your body, it's either snug, kind of if you want like an elasticy waistband. If you want it to fit the exact dimension of your cardigan, you can do that as well. Just make sure you don't go bigger than your cardigan. So again, it'll be the same thing. You'll chain 6 and then half double crochet slip stitch in back loop only across, which will give you 5 of those. Or if you want a thicker trim, you can chain more. If you want a thinner trim, you can chain less. And like I said, just keep going until you have the width or circumference that you want for your entire trim, or go ahead and do it in the 3 separate pieces. Up to you. All right, good morning. Here's a dog head. I finished my trim for the bottom and it fits around the part where my cardigan ends. When I cut it off, I'm going to leave a very long yarn tail so that I can sew it to the entire bottom of my cardigan, including the front and back panels. All right, so it's really hard to see, but I am starting with sewing it onto the front panel, making sure that it'll be in the direction that I want, so with my little V's pointing down. And I'm not gonna bunch it up on the front panels. I'm only going to bunch it in the back so that the front looks a little bit more, I don't know, flat. And by bunching it, I mean doing the exact same thing that we did when we put the wrist cuff onto the sleeve. Once I'm done with the front panel, I'm going to sewing it onto the back panel, which is over here. This just is really hard to show, so I'll show you guys when I'm done. If you did 3 separate trims, then it'll just be front panel, front panel, nothing will connect. So here is what mine looks like. I will elaborate, also ignore the ski stuff. We went skiing, insert photos here. That was the Hey Dude sweater and the grape soda sweater that are perfect to ski in. I've attached mine. As you can see, it's all one continuous strip if I open it, and I've got my little V's pointing down on the right side. And note that the sides are not sewn together yet. So the only thing attaching it all together right now is the trim. If you opted to do the separate trims on each front panel and the back panel, then just take note that your sides will not be connected like this, and that's okay. So do not sew it together yet if you opted to do the 3 separate parts. All right, now it's time to do the front trim that has the buttons on it. So this one's gonna be really simple. You are going to do the exact same thing you did for this. Chain 6 and half double crochet, slip stitch, and back loop only till you reach the exact same length from the top of your front panel down to the bottom of your trim. Here's mine. As you can see, it goes from the bottom, including my trim that I just attached, all the way to where the neck would start. So what I'm gonna do is trim this, leaving a long enough tail. You guys know the drill. We're gonna be sewing this on. So it's up to you whether you wanna add your buttons before or after sewing it. I went looking for buttons and I can't find anything that I like, so mine's not gonna have buttons as of right now, but make sure that you put your buttons on the rows that you want. And then also it's very important for you to count these rows and remember how many you did, because we're gonna do the exact same number for the other side. Now it's time to do the side that has the buttonholes. So I'm gonna show you how to do that. So always start with your 6 chains, and then you will do your half double crochet, slip stitch, back loop only across your first row, chain 1 and turn. Now assuming that you put a button on your first or second row and you want a buttonhole, what you're gonna do, half double crochet, slip stitch, back loop only 2, then you will chain 1 and then half double crochet, slip stitch, back loop only 2. So when you do that, it'll give you a little hole like this. Now, because my yarn is really chunky, I did only skip 1, which gave me this size of a hole. So it's really up to you and the size of your button. For this yarn, again, just because it stretches quite a bit and it is big, I'm only skipping 1. So I've got my 2 stitches on this side, chain 1, skip 1, and then the 2 stitches in the last 2. But like I said, if you want to, you can make basically as many chains or skips as you would like to tailor it to the size of your button. You're gonna keep going with this exact same pattern that we are doing, half double crochet, slip stitch, back loop only across. But when you guys get to a row that you put a button on, so let's say I put a button on row 6 of my trim on the other side, then I would do a buttonhole row. And so that's simple. You should have the exact same amount of rows for this trim that you did on the trim that we just did for the button side. And here is this one attached on. You can't really see the buttonholes, but I ended up putting them every 10th row. 10 rows in between each buttonhole, which means they're on the 12th, and then 22nd, and then 32nd, and I think I left it at 42nd. Okay, so the next and final part of the trim now will be to do the exact same thing, but this time it will be from here to here. So the space that we left for the neck. And once you have made something that is the exact same length, I will show you what to do. Here's my neck piece. As you can see, it goes from this to this. The way that we're gonna sew this on is we're actually gonna start by sewing it on to the front trim. So it'll be like this. Then you'll connect the bottom onto here. And then once you get there, you'll connect the other side to the other side, front side trim. I hope that makes sense. It will make more sense as soon as I am done. And there you go. It kind of looks like the trim has become one whole piece, if that makes any sense, because like I said, the side is sewn to the top of the side trim here along the neck, and then sewn together at the other side trim. So it's just like one big continuous piece, and this is what it should look like right now. And now the only thing we have left to do, there's only one more step left, you've made it this far, is to sew on the sleeves. To sew on the sleeve, where we sewed the sleeve together like this will be what's facing downwards. So you guys will be matching it up like this. We'll first be attaching at the armpit. You'll sew upwards up to the shoulder, down around the other side until you connect back at the armpit. Once you're here, you're going to sew all the way down the side all the way up to your trim. And if you did your trim in 3 pieces, you'll sew down the trim and then repeat on the other side. So just make sure that you have a piece of yarn that is long enough to sew around the entire sleeve and then down the side of your cardigan. Got both sleeves on. All right, and on that note, if you have managed to make it this far, thank you so much for watching. If you did make it, please send me some pictures at High Level Bandanas. And if you want to check out more patterns, it's all on www.highlevelbandanas.com, which I will all leave here. I won't make this outro longer than it needs to be because this was already very long. So thank you guys so much, and I'll see you next time. Bye.